Chinese University of Hong Kong is greatly honored to have invited Madam Clarkson to deliver a lecture today at the university. Now, may I also invite Madam Clarkson and Professor Lawrence Lau, the Vice Chancellor of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to be seated. Madam Clarkson and Professor Lau, please. And now, may I please invite Professor Lau to deliver a welcoming address. Professor Lau, please.
The Right Honorable Adrienne Clarkson, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to you all and welcome to the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Today, we are most honored and privileged to have with us as our distinguished speaker, the Right Honorable Adrienne Clarkson, former Governor General of Canada. Madam Clarkson will speak to us this afternoon on From Hong Kong to Hong Kong in 65 Years. I'm extremely grateful to her for coming to our campus to share with our faculty and students her wisdom and wealth of experience. And as you will discover, Madame Clarkson is actually our native daughter of Hong Kong. Let's welcome Madame Clarkson. Madame Clarkson was born in Hong Kong. She immigrated to Canada as a 3-year-old with her parents during the Second World War and grew up in Ottawa. She read English literature at the University of Toronto and earned her BA degree and then a master's degree in the early 1960s. She also did postgraduate study at the Sorbonne in Paris. A leading figure in Canada's cultural life, Madame Clarkson had a rich and distinguished career in broadcasting, journalism, the arts, and public service. She began as a TV host interviewer for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, in 1965, gradually gaining for herself a unique reputation for her incisiveness, charm, and poise. From 1982 to 1987, Madame Clarkson served as the first Agent General for Ontario in Paris and was fully engrossed in promoting Ontario's business and cultural interests in France, Italy, and Spain. Between 1987 and 1988, she was president and publisher of McClelland and Stewart, a leading publishing house in Canada. In 1988, Madame Clarkson returned to the CBC, where for 11 years she worked as host, writer, and producer for a series of TV programs that featured Canadian artists in film, theater, dance, and music. She also directed several films, authored 3 novels, and contributed numerous articles to major newspapers and magazines across Canada. Madame Clarkson was appointed the 26th Governor General of Canada in 1999. Her appointment marks several firsts. She was the first Governor General without a military or political background, the first immigrant, and the first Chinese Canadian to be appointed to the vice-regal position. She brought a new style to the role of Governor General, traveling extensively to Canadian communities of all sizes across the world, raising Canada's profile and acknowledging the courage and commitment of the Canadian Armed Forces. Upon leaving the office of Governor General in 2005, Madame Clarkson founded the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, which has a mission to help acculturate new Canadian citizens into mainstream Canadian life. Last March, she became Colonel-in-Chief of Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, the first Canadian to be Colonel-in-Chief of a Canadian regiment. An eminent writer, a leading media personality with some 30 years of experience in broadcasting, one of the most influential cultural icons in Canada, and a visionary and effective leader. Madame Clarkson has received numerous awards in recognition of her outstanding contribution in various professional, social, and charitable endeavors. She was made an Officer of the Order of Canada in 1992 and a Companion of the Order of Canada in 1999 for her services to Canada. She was honored with the Grand Cross of the Order of Pleiades, I hope I got it right, from France in 2001, and the Order of Friendship of the Russian Federation in 2006. She has also received honorary doctorates and fellowships from over 20 universities and academic societies. Ladies and gentlemen, Madame Clarkson left Hong Kong 65 years ago and is back here this afternoon to speak to us on the meaning of Hong Kong in her life. I'm sure you can't wait to be inspired by her insights and rich experience, so please join me in warmly welcoming the Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor, for that very kind introduction to Hong Kong University today and to a group of students and faculty. It's the first time I've ever been on the campus of Hong Kong, of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and I'm pleased to see that there are a lot of trees still left around it. When you've been in Hong Kong for about 5 days, you do long to see more and more trees. And I think that it is, for me, rather startling admission when I'm called a native daughter. It has to be emphasized that I'm originally a native, but I've not been a very filial daughter because I haven't been here for 28 years. And Amy asked me in the car, Amy Tzu, who drove me here very nicely, why haven't you been back? And there's no positive answer to that. I don't have a positive reason for that, but let's just say life took me in other directions. But coming back this time has been most interesting, mainly because of being able to be here for a purpose. I'm not a workaholic. I always emphasize that to people, and I don't believe in being a workaholic. I always believe I know how to enjoy myself. But I guess one of the things I really like to do is to go to a place and have a kind of purpose and a meaning. And this time I was invited here in order to be the chair of the jury of the Man Asian Literary Prize, which you may have read about in the papers. And it's a very important prize. This is the first year it's been given, and it will be, I hope, an important factor in cultural life for Asia and Asia vis-a-vis the world, because it's concentrating on writing from all over Asia, which will help us to understand each other. And I think it's particularly interesting to have writing which we would not otherwise not pay much attention to, or would only have local attention in their countries, that will now attract an English-speaking audience. And that is very important for us, because although we read a lot and talk a lot about the giants economic giants of Asia, like China booming, India booming, it isn't just economics that makes for something interesting. There is more than that. There is a total culture out of which those things boom. And that's what I sense when I'm here in Hong Kong, which of course has the best food in the world. And my friend Sandra here took me last night to the best Cantonese food I have ever had. And I have to say that Toronto is pretty good, as is Vancouver, because there's so many Chinese in Canada now. But this was the most remarkable Cantonese food I have ever had. And that made me think again that Hong Kong has this real specialty of being that is just as important as, say, literature or the economic boom. All of these things make life. There isn't just one aspect to life. There's all of the different aspects to life. Of course, I haven't been here for 28 years, and I hardly recognize anything. And when I tell you that the Mandarin Hotel, where I am staying this time, was the tallest building on the waterfront in the beginning of the 60s when I first came back for a bit, and the Bank of China was there, and that's the only things I recognize, plus the Legco. But the Hong Kong Club is gone. And so there are very, very few points that I really recognize, and I think if I wasn't to come back for another 10 years, I would realize that next time I'll be able to walk to Kowloon from Hong Kong, because you're reclaiming so much land in the harbor. It doesn't get all washed away in the meantime. You just don't know. Yesterday, I took a car in the afternoon by myself because I wanted to go up to the peak and see if I recognized anything. In a short manner, I will say I did not. I couldn't find the Hotong Mansion, which was a kind of place that you looked at. Came down on the other side to Repulse Bay, and Repulse Bay Hotel was a place that before the war and after the war and into I don't know when, it just became a facade basically, was a place which was a very wonderful place in our family's life. And I have family pictures that show little beach huts on the Repulse Bay Beach, and my family, my mother and her sisters and my grandmother in their woolen bathing suits of the 30s, wearing high-heeled shoes on the beach because it's Hong Kong, right? And the scenery is still the same if you look out, but it's not anywhere else the same. Then I thought I will really put myself to a trial, and I will go to the house where I was born. I was actually born in a hospital, but the house we lived in when I was born, which was on Broome Road at the top of Blue Pool Road, above Happy Valley Racecourse, because my father was an amateur jockey, a gentleman jockey, as they call it. People, before the war, as throughout the British Empire, people owned their own horses and rode their horses and their friends' horses, and they were gentleman jockeys. They weren't professional racing as we now know it. And it was a wonderful kind of life and a wonderful time. And so we lived in Broome Road when I was born, and I could not believe it. We turned a corner, and there was the house, and there were the houses of Broome Road, 2-story, 3-story houses still there. So I feel that there is something of me that remains here, and that's the house that I was born in, and I'm very, very grateful because I don't recognize much else. Then to go down into Wan Chai and to think of it as it used to be in the 60s and as it is now. And of course, when the Japanese took over Hong Kong and they had their victory parade, as I recount in my autobiography, we actually walked from Wan Chai to the west end of Hong Kong through Central in one day, and every place we had to sort of stop, and it was a rather terrible time, which I describe. But when I go through and drive these places, I think this is what I did when I was a child. This is the way it was, and I think it's very interesting to remember those things, and that's what Hong Kong does for me. It's a living memory. But it has its seductions, and the food is only one of them. The physical site, even though it's covered with cement, 40 stories and things, is still a very beautiful, beautiful site, and I really like that. However, fate decided that we were not going to live in Hong Kong, and I think we never dwelt on the fact of what would have happened had we stayed in Hong Kong. My father came back for business reasons. I would come back occasionally, but after he no longer was doing business here, there was really no reason to come back, and most of my mother's family, because my father is Australian Chinese, my mother's family emigrated to Canada, so there really was not, there was no real relatives here to see, only friends occasionally. And that meant that that world, which we said goodbye to in the 40s, had really for us been a finished world. But I'm very glad to come back and be part of something like the Man Asian Literary Prize, because I feel that that's what it means now, is to take the world which one knew at a certain time to be a certain kind of world and to have it explained in a different way to everyone. And the list of 5 finalists came from all different countries: the Philippines, Burma, China, Hong Kong, India. And I think that's what Asia is really all about, and what people who only read in English should learn about. For me, then, I would say that Canada became, and I was about 60 years ahead of the wave, or 40 years ahead of the wave, became the home which we had to have. Robert Frost, the American poet, puts it this way: home is the place where when you have to go there, they take you in. And that's what Canada did for us, for my family and I. At the time, the government was, people from Hong Kong, any Chinese for that matter, were not welcomed as immigrants to Canada. It's very hard for people now, a lot of you of your age, to understand or realize that, but Australia and Canada were very white countries, and they wanted to keep it that way. They wanted to have it never have anybody. Even in the beginning of the 20th century, when large waves of immigration were sought to open up the prairies, there were many debates in intellectual journals, in university journals, about whether Italians were really white people, or whether Ukrainians and Hungarians were actually white people and suitable to come to this little pink dot of the British Empire. In fact, I think what is wonderful about Canada is that when I got there, when I was a child with my parents and my brother, we were, just the four of us, all alone, one suitcase each. We were refugees. We had no status whatsoever except as British subjects of Hong Kong. In my lifetime, Canada has become the most open country in the world, and also the most intelligently focused on recruiting immigrants who will become citizens of Canada and help create the Canada of the 21st century. Sir Wilfrid Laurier, who was one of our greatest prime ministers, our first French-Canadian prime minister at the turn of the 20th century, said that the 20th century belonged to Canada. I think he was anticipating a little. I think 21st century is a little bit better. And we have the chance of doing that because we have been such an open society, and because I think we do have a very intelligent, very concentrated, hard-working policy on what we want for our country and the kind of people we want. We want people who want to live in our country and assume the values that we have all lived and worked for. I used to do citizenship ceremonies occasionally when I was Governor General, and it wasn't something that Governors General usually did, because citizenship ceremonies, we have 2,900 of them a year because we have 260,000 new citizens a year. So about 100 people get processed. In a city like Toronto, there are sometimes 2 ceremonies a day in different parts of Toronto. In Vancouver as well, I think that's about par for the course. I think we have about 550 ceremonies in Toronto. Vancouver has about 450. Then my institute is starting to gather together volunteer groups called Citizens for Citizenship, who will help to have community ceremonies to welcome citizens. The idea of citizenship for us is that the people who come to Canada must be, as they are received, people who can give us something as people. And we do not look upon them, I never have looked upon them, as people who simply want to come because they want to take something. They may even start out that way, thinking they're going to come because we have freedom of this, because we have free schools, because we have medical care, because we have... But inevitably, the richness of backgrounds of everybody in the world who decide that they would like to emigrate, that they will take that little leap of faith, means that they bring us something. And I'm very, very pointed in telling new Canadians that when you come to Canada and you become a citizen, and I don't care if you end up coming back to Hong Kong for a while, or you think maybe I won't, maybe I will, there's no question that if you are a Canadian citizen, if you live in Canada, you must accept everything that we are as a country. You have to accept the history of your adopted family. And that's what we are, a family of people who are Canadians. And by adopting that, we know that you have become part of us. It's just like being adopted into a family. You have a mother and a father, and you realize that there was crazy old Aunt Harriet and other people that they never speak to, second cousins, so-and-so married the wrong person, therefore you don't have them for Christmas. All of that stuff writ large is what happens in a country. So when you come to Canada and you become a citizen and make that decision, it is not like a big holiday buffet table where you can say, well, I think I'll have the roast beef, but I won't have the ham. And I think I'll have some green salad, but I won't have the cooked red peppers. What happens in Canada for citizenship, and I think should happen for every country that has a citizenship policy, is that you take not a buffet, but you get a fixed menu. And the fixed menu is, this is it, and this is what we are, and this is the country that you came to and that we all created so that you could take your place in it. And it began 400 years ago. And the one thing I will never want to hear from new citizens is, but I don't care about the Aboriginal people and what wrongs happened to them. I wasn't here when that happened. I am not responsible for that. There is no such thing as not having responsibility once you have decided to become a citizen, because you are going to get the rights and freedoms of a citizen, you get the responsibilities. And it is true in Canada, even though we have done remarkably well by world standards, that we have some very dark spots in our history. One of them is our relationship with the Aboriginal peoples, whom we have treated with great unfairness and in many ways betrayed totally, even though they entered into treaties in very good faith with us in the 19th century so that we would use their land. And in fact, we cheated them. And we know that. And any of us who know that realize that we have to deal with that. And we will be dealing with that for the next at least 20 years. And so our new Canadians have to know that that's something that they have to deal with too. This is our responsibility collectively as a nation. The responsibilities that we have as a nation are so vital to the health of our society, to the way in which we look at ourselves, to the way in which we say to ourselves, we can be this kind of country, and therefore we will have a certain force in the world. The nature of the unfairness towards Orientals in Canada doesn't mean that I resent Canada because they didn't let Chinese men bring their wives here for 100 years. That isn't the way it works. What I want to make sure is that we are sorry for that and that we wish that that had not happened, but since it did, we will make it right now. And I think that we have tried to make that right, and we now have people coming from all over the globe. 80% of Canadians believe that immigration is a good thing for our country. 80%. 90% believe that being a bilingual country, English and French, is a good thing. And those two things, in a way, can't go together, because I think the reason why we were able to evolve and the reason why we were able to say we want to have people is that we are used to complexity in Canada. I know we look like dull little people and who do good in the world and are not very exciting and not very glamorous, all of that. In fact, we are extremely able to deal with complexity because we made a country in 1867 at a time when people were killing each other for their religions. In England, Catholics were not allowed to hold public office, and we made a country between English and French origined people and between Catholics and Protestants. And that has changed everything. It has changed. It has been a kind of country which understands that you are not one thing. That's also what makes it possible for us to have a successful immigrant society, because we don't expect everybody to have bloodlines that mean that they can take a certain nationality. We're very, very happy about that. I am invited quite a lot, and was when I was Governor General, and it hasn't stopped, which is what gave me the idea for this institute, for its foreign ramifications, by the European Union and the countries in Europe about how has Canada managed to have a society which is based on immigration. There's a kind of grudging admiration of us about it. Because until fairly recently, for instance, you could not become a German citizen unless you could prove that you had German blood. So we are talking race here. We are talking about race-based citizenship. And that is the farthest thing in the world that we have in Canada. We have not got that. What we have is a set of beliefs now enshrined in something called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms since 1982. And we have a sense of our history, or those of us who really care about our history, and we keep trying to push that. We push it all the time, try to push it, courses in our history for high schools particularly, because high schools have dropped history to a great degree. We have decided that we want to have this kind of society, and we decided fairly recently. So we are able to have people coming from all over the world, and they are now not of British Isles origin or former Commonwealth origin. Most of our immigration at the moment, as I speak, is coming from Somalia, Sudan, Sri Lanka, the Congo, Ethiopia, Eritrea. And Bangladesh. That's a very, very different pattern. Okay, people say, well, in Somalia, they don't have education, they don't have government, they don't have the rule of law, they don't have freedom of speech, they have nothing. But they don't have nothing. When you don't have those things, other things become very developed, like community feeling, like family feeling. And I was present about 4 years ago when the first Somalian Canadian graduated from a university. It took exactly 12 years from the time we had our first Somalian to the time somebody graduated who was Somalian origin, a woman, of course. Somalian origin that is how long it took. And it doesn't take much longer for us to acculturate people, because they come to a country where education is completely free. And not only is it free, but it's very, very good. Now, we also have private schools. It's a free society. People want to spend 45,000 Canadian dollars a year to send their children to boarding school. It's up to them. It's fine. That's what they want to do with their money. But you don't need to. And my husband and I both have had very interesting lives and careers. He's a very prominent writer. All went through public schools, like public school down the road where we walked to school. Public schools, public universities, because in Canada we have public universities. We do pay, but they're by no means the kind of payments that one thinks of in terms of places like the United States. And then I went to university afterwards in France, where nobody pays for university. And that's generally true of the European countries. You get nothing, you pay nothing to go to university. Now you could say nothing gets you nothing, but it seems to educate the French, and they aren't dumb. The Germans, and also the Germans have a wonderful system where they can move from university to university. They can carry things with them. They can go from Tübingen to Göttingen to Heidelberg, etc. We have a lot to learn in that area, but we aren't at the moment doing that. So we have all these freedoms that people get as part of the package of becoming Canadian. And I think it's very essential for us now to make sure that Canadians are made aware of the fact that everybody who comes usually wants to have education once they get to a place where it is basically free. We must never think, too, that people who come from countries where there is chaos and anarchy and where they've grown up in refugee camps don't have any inkling of what it is to behave in a civilized manner to other people. One of the most outstanding examples I saw while I was Governor General is that I was responsible for giving out all honors, national honors, and one of them is the Awards for Bravery, the Star of Bravery, the Medal, the Cross of Bravery. And this would involve about 30 people at a time, 4 times a year, who had done extraordinarily brave acts. They broke down, I realized after 2 or 3 years into about 3 or 4 categories. The following. You're driving down a road, you're at the Fraser River, which is in the west coast of Canada. It's end of March or early April, and you see a bridge and you see somebody throwing themselves off that bridge. You stop your car, you leap into the river, you swim out, you get them, and you bring them back to shore. You don't know them. They were trying to commit suicide. You bring them, you take care of them, and you get an award for it, but you didn't do it for that. You don't know who this person is. This happens time and time again, that people go and save people who are trying to do away with themselves. Another case is, you're driving down a 4-lane highway, a car in front of you, or often a truck, bursts into flames, and they veer over into the soft shoulder. You drive up behind them, you go out, you try to break the window, try to drag the person out or a baby out of a car seat in the back, break the sunroof, get all bloody, do things, drag them out onto the side of the road and as far from the car as possible, and the car bursts into flames. Sometimes the car or the truck bursts into flames so that the highway melts. Why do you do this? You know, why do people do things like this? And I think they do it because there's an instinct for the human race when it's caught without social constructs around it that urge competition and winning at all costs. The original primal urge of human beings is to take care of each other so that the human race will survive. And I think that's an evolutionary thing that we have in us. And I've seen it over and over again and asked the people who did these brave acts, you know, you pulled somebody out of a car, the flames were coming up, you've got scars on your hands from burns, why did you do that? And he said, well, you know, I looked down in the face of this guy in the car and I thought, that guy is me. A profound identification with another human being as a human being. I think that these kinds of things, when they are encouraged in a civic way for people, and we tried always to make a great deal of these brave acts, it was not, I would say that only about 20% of the brave acts involved you're saving somebody that you knew or were related to. 80% were from total strangers. And that proves to me that we basically have something in us that if we can take away all the stuff that gets in the way, we basically want to take care of each other and we want each other to survive and do well. And that's the whole basis of citizenship. And we must, I think, in this world that knows a great deal of conflict, that knows all of the things that are really, really ugly, try to practice this kind of civic spirit and the creation of a civil society that way. I was very fortunate as Governor General to be able to travel about 150,000 to 200,000 kilometers a year across our country, which is the second largest country in the world. And I went to the north a great deal. I missed that very, very much because I used to go every 3 or 4 months north of the Arctic Circle to the communities that live there to be with the Inuit people, who are very extraordinary people, nomads, rather like the Mongolians who are described in Wolf Totem, the book that won the Man Asian Literary Prize. So that's why I personally was very, very interested in the subject matter of this, because nomads know how to share land, they know how to share resources. They never have to say, this is mine, and fence it off. They're not related even to each other necessarily, but they can move around the huge territories and each be able to be sourced and resourced out of those territories. And it's fascinating to see that way of life still continuing to a great extent in our north, and even more so now that Nunavut is an autonomous region, the whole of the eastern Arctic. And I was able to see that that had a resonance for us as Canadians, that if we keep in mind that we have Canadians, all right, there's only 30,000 Inuit left, but they are growing, they have a high birth rate, that we can feel that they give us something that adds to our citizenship. We are not just people living in a narrow little silver band attached to the United States across the 49th parallel. It's very, very important for us to have that feeling that we go almost into infinity in Canada, beyond the North Pole. I was very interested in our sovereignty in the North, which I think is constantly being eroded, and with global warming even more so, as the Northwest Passage is opened more and more, and there are cruise ships planning to do cruises through the North. They'll probably be selling them in Hong Kong, is the thing you want to do in the summer when it's too hot here. But those are not international waters. The Northwest Passage belongs to Canada. And the reason why it's important that we recognize that is that we have the stewardship of that. And if cruise ships go through, then we have no way of controlling what the ecological damage will be. This is not a territory that was meant to be trafficked in that way. And we have a strong element in our society which is about that stewardship. We are brought up, certainly when I was growing up, we were brought up with a great sense of stewardship towards nature, because every tree, even, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? We must have so many trillions of trees. Why would you think that one, when you're looking at it, you would question yourself whether you would cut it down? But in a city like Toronto, if you cut down a tree, even if it's on your own property, you will pay a $180 fine. You have to get permission from the city because the tree canopy is very precious to a city like Toronto. And it's all tied in with the ecology of what a city can be, and although it's not the most beautiful city in the world, I have to admit, it at least does pay attention to these kinds of details. That stewardship, that nature, that relationship to nature is something that I want new citizens also to have. I founded the Institute for Canadian Citizenship upon leaving Rideau Hall, and it's the government's legacy to me. Governors General can start a foundation if they wish to. Only 2 of my predecessors, my 8 Canadian predecessors, have done so. But I feel it's very important because this citizenship thing is important. One of the things I'm concerned about is that new immigrants and then citizens be attached to what Canada represents, the country that they came to, the country that they see the surface of. Beautiful country, clean country. Toronto is New York run by the Swiss, said somebody. It's a place where you'll see a woman, well-dressed woman on the subway, reach down and pick up a scrap of paper and put it in the garbage. That is the kind of, because I've done it myself, so I know, but I also see it. And I see that on the subway, there's people of every color, and that's not dirty. The subway is clean, and people have come from all over the world. In one subway car, there'll be maybe 20 different origins of people. And that's our relationship to, we say it's cleanliness, but behind the cleanliness, it's a relationship to nature. And I want our new citizens to have that relationship. I also want them to have the relationship to everything that we've created artistically. Our literature, which has boomed ever since I've grown up. I was in exactly the same university year as Margaret Atwood, and we're still very close friends, and have been, but at the time we were at university, we didn't read a single Canadian novel. We read only English literature. We didn't read any other Commonwealth literature either, for that matter. Now, of course, kids are reading in public school, high school, booming. The theater, music, everything. We also have the tradition of our music, which we've very much worked on, our opera. And all of these things should be open to everyone who comes to the country and decides to become a citizen. And that's the other thing that the Institute is doing. We are going to all cultural institutions across the country and asking them to give free vouchers to their institutions, a certain number of them, to all new citizens when they become, the day they become citizens, so that for a year they'll be able to go to the Royal Ontario Museum or the Toronto Symphony or the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in Vancouver or whatever, so that they get the habit of going to these places, and they don't feel intimidated. And with it will come a booklet, because a lot of people come from countries where they haven't had the chance ever to go. And the booklet will say, you can go to a symphony concert at Roy Thomson Hall dressed as you would be from work. There will be an intermission. You can buy something to eat during the intermission. The intermission will usually last 20 minutes. It's customary that people eat in the lobby at the intermission and do not eat in the... The symphony has 4 movements. Sometimes people think that they're not supposed to clap in between them. In the 19th century, people did clap in between. Don't feel self-conscious about that. Always everybody claps at the end. All the little things that people who are used to doing, we must make people feel comfortable about doing. Inclusivity is the only way you can have a society based upon immigration in which you make people citizens. We have about 1% of our population that is a new citizen component every year, because we have 31 million people together. Those are the kinds of things we have to have. And for nature, I want to have scholarships for children to go to summer camps. We have very good summer camps for children out west. They tend to be hiking and so on. But people are used in Canada to sending children off at about the age of 8 to go for $1,000 a week to go and live in a ramshackle cabin in a sleeping bag on 2 inches of foam, and getting up at 7:30 in the morning and leaping into the water, learning how to canoe and kayak and sail and be related to nature, to be able to look at snakes in the woods and not beat them to death, to be able to know what to do if they happen to see a brown bear, because there are lots of bears. There are lots of foxes, there are lots of everything, and to cohabit with them, as we always have in Canada, and not to think, when we have a booklet for the area called Algonquin Park, which is our most used provincial park, and it's mammals, and it shows you muskrats, foxes, minks, etc., and then under M is man. And it shows you how man lives, and he's in a little trailer, and they tell you what the habits are of man. But man is a mammal, like other animals. And I think we have to realize that's one of the beauties of becoming Canadian and being part of them. So for me, all of those things come out of the fact that I was received into a country called Canada with very definite values, a time, things that could be changed and have been changed. And I feel that that's what all people who come to Canada can help to do. They can make a difference and make a change. And of course, in Canada, I believe it's very important, if you can possibly do it, and there's no reason why you can't, as in every city and town, there are French immersion schools where children who are Anglophone children can have their entire education in French for free. And my husband and I are back this, and always have for a long time. My own children went through French immersion from the time they went to kindergarten. And my granddaughter, aged 5, has just started junior kindergarten, and she insists on speaking French only at home. Now, she has a limited vocabulary at the moment, but she loves it. And if you learn French from the very beginning, your English will be fine, because that's all you speak at home, and that's all you speak when you're not at school. And that's what I think 350,000 to 400,000 children in Canada are in free French immersion schools. And that helps to contain the fabric of our country, which was created on an original deal that everybody would be able to be served in the original language, English, French. And I'm very pleased whenever I go to graduation ceremonies of schools that many, many, many new citizens take advantage of this. Imagine being able to learn another language like that. And most of them have another language at home that is a maternal language, which might be Urdu, Portuguese, Italian. This is something that is a value for us and something that we can carry out into the world because we understand that kind of complexity. It's the kind of complexity that is valuable, because being simple, unless you're even as an organism, is not the most favorable thing to be. If you highly develop yourselves, its cells develop, everything develops, you become, I think, a society which can do things not only for itself, but also in the world. And the world is now an extremely small place. Our message as Canadians to the world is that we can do things in a way which understands that other people may not be like us. And it is very important in any society to understand that you are not going to love everybody, and everybody is not going to love you. There is a great mistake made when people think, we have to love everybody. A society is not made up of that. Society is made up of people, well, that you might not even want to speak to very much less have a sandwich with or sit down on a park bench with. But they have every right to live in that society as long as they contribute what that society asks of them. So you must never think, I don't love that person, therefore they don't belong in my society. Society is created by all kinds of different people. And that's what we have to learn to live with, and that's why we develop a kind, I think, of sophistication in the best sense of being able to say, I don't think that, I don't like that, but, you know, here we are in a democracy, maybe, you know, this is what they want to do, and I can say to them, I don't like it, and I don't like you, but I'm not going to kill you, I'm not going to kidnap you, I'm not going to put you in jail, I just don't like you. But we have a structure that is strong enough democratically to handle all of that. And that's what you want for citizenship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Clarkson, for your most inspiring lecture. Madam Clarkson has also agreed to stay for a while for a question and answer session. And now I would like to invite, re-invite, I guess, Professor Lau to moderate that session for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clarkson, once again, for that most insightful and fascinating talk to us. Thank you again. The floor is now open for questions. Please identify yourself and then try to make the question short rather than a speech. Okay, please.
One good thing you can always do is do three people can ask questions, and I can do answers to all three together. It sometimes works out quite well that way.
Please.
My name is Jane Jackson. I'm a Canadian, and I have been here for about 13 years. But I would like to preface my question with a few comments. And first of all, I'd like to say that I grew up watching you and Paul Soles on 30 Minutes, and then also Fifth Estate and Adrian Presents, and I enjoyed all of that very, very much. And also, I have a comment that I promised my mother that I would say, and that is she has read your book, and I will be reading it in December when I get back home. But
you can get it from Patty Field here online.
Okay. Anyway, she was very impressed with it. Now, I wonder, in your speech, you've alluded to a few changes you've made as Governor General, and I'm wondering what other changes you have made, perhaps to perhaps change the institution of Governor Generalship?
Well, when I decided that I would be able to do it, because I think it is an enormous responsibility to be Governor General, and the buck stops there, that's all. In our Constitution, the Governor General is ultimately responsible for signing all laws. In fact, the Governor General must be scrupulously apolitical, not have any kind of political bias or belong to any political party, etc. That doesn't mean they don't have any ideas. Because when people would say, you know, you're such an activist, you care about these things and that things, and I said, sure, but, you know, and they said that could be construed as political. I said, yeah, well, tell me the political party that is for violence against women, or homelessness, or child poverty, or unbridled development. And, you know, and that, we'll talk then. But, ideas are ideas, and those are something that you've got to speak about. And we spoke out about all of those things. Another thing we tried to do was, whenever we went anywhere, we wouldn't just go for a day. We would go for a week. We would go to an area for a week. And we traveled for instance, we were in the province of Alberta. I was Governor General for 6 years, just as an example. And when I went for the last time to Alberta to celebrate the centenary of Alberta and Saskatchewan becoming provinces in 1905, and it was 2005, we counted up, I was in Alberta 18 times when I was Governor General. And it wasn't just little trips. I mean, we did some fun things. We would sometimes drive. Not just fly in and fly out. We would drive. One wonderful trip we did. We drove from Lethbridge, Alberta, to Taber. I wanted to see Taber because that's where a lot of the Japanese Canadians who were deported by the Canadian government in the war in 1943 ended up. They were able to leave this virtual concentration camps in the interior of BC where they were scooted to and where their property had all been confiscated and sold off for profit by other people. And a number of them were allowed to go to Taber, Alberta, because they have a sugar beet industry there, and they worked as sugar beet farmers. And it was interesting to go to Taber because there were a number of Japanese Canadian farmers there of the second generation growing potatoes now for Frito-Lay. And they had liked it. They had been, this isn't where they wanted to be. They'd been picked up and put there, and they liked it. They're real Albertans. And we then went on to Fort Macleod, and we went to see rodeos, because the rodeos are interesting in all small towns in the West. And then drove up to Red Deer and Fort Macleod, Calgary, and Edmonton. And all of that is fascinating. And then when they were in the north, we traveled a lot by dog sled. We slept in igloo, and that was always very, very interesting. The young people who I hired a lot of young people to work for me. I had a group of 5 young people because they were a couple of Anglophones, a couple of Francophones, but the Anglophones were all products of French immersion schooling, so they all perfectly bilingual, because I had to have in Ottawa bilingual staff. And then also I'd just say that I could never have been Governor General without being bilingual. There's just no way that you can do that job and not be bilingual, because you represent both on all sides, and you have to do speeches in both languages and divide that up too. So I think I tried to transform it in the sense that I went places and had people talk to me and tell me what was on their minds, because even though I'm not political, I had frequent meetings I met the Prime Minister almost on a weekly basis, because that's a sort of duty in the constitutional system that we have. And I could call in any ministers at any time, and did, and say, I heard about such and such. And sometimes it would be very small things about details on fishing boats, for instance. And Minister of Fisheries was always very interested in having feedback on things. So you could always talk to them about what people had talked to you about. You were a conduit in that way. And I worked that very hard because I think it's very important. And the ceremonial part of being Governor General, the handing out of awards, I gave the average number of speeches I gave a year was 170, from 5 minutes to sometimes, an hour. Big lectures, maybe 5 or 6 a year, but the other was always, it's now such a relief to me to go to events where I know they're not going to say, and now we will hear from, and I have to get to my feet and do it. I don't have to anymore. I actually go to head tables and I'm not asked to speak. So it was something that I thought, I will do it because I think that people in Canada deserve to have a visible Governor General. Otherwise, why bother? Mind you, we wouldn't be able to change it because it would require constitutional change. The entire country would have to say, the Parliament, federal Parliament would have to pass it by 60%, which they never would. And each provincial legislature would have to pass it by 60%, which they never would. So there isn't any choice. You've got the Governor General. You're stuck with it. So let's make it something imaginative.
Thank you. Mr. Chen.
I'm Adam Tertek, Consul General of Hungary here.
Hello.
And I would like to ask you why you have decided to become Governor General. What made you to take this job, as you were widely involved in the media? So what made you decide to run for this?
Well, let's put it this way. I sometimes say that the media or television, which is what I did, but it wasn't just that. I worked for public broadcasting. I worked for CBC, and that was, to me, very, very important. I never worked for a commercial network. And because I was brought up really to believe that things you did because you could really do them well and wanted to do them, and not because they would just pay you well. So it was very important to me, my career in television, and I had a wonderful career. I really had a good run, but that part of that's luck too, because you're either good at it or you're not, and it's a very cruel business. I've said this at graduation ceremonies of communications departments in universities. Either the camera likes you and believes you, or it does not. And there's no way that you can make it by training. You can become a movie star, you can become Paris Hilton if you want, because it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. You're not in any kind of, people don't have to believe you in any way. But if people have to believe you, you have to be able to communicate something to them. And the reason I did it was, the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, was somebody that I had respect for. And I felt that he was asking me for probably the right reasons, that he thought I would do a good job, and not because I was a woman or because I was Chinese or any of those things. I don't think he really thought of that. And he certainly didn't think of me as a television person. He is a francophone. And I first met him when he was first elected to Parliament. At the age of 28, he and his wife came from a place called Shawinigan, and they didn't speak a word of English. And I met them at Parliament. There was a big reception with press and so on for the opening of Parliament at that point. And I've never forgotten meeting them, because he was handsome and she was beautiful, and they only spoke French. And somebody came to me and said, these people, the Chrétiens, they don't speak any English at all. Could you come and talk to them? So we had a lovely conversation. I've always remembered that. And then subsequently, I was Agent General for Ontario and France, and he was a minister. He was a minister in 11 different portfolios before he ever became Prime Minister. And he was excellent at a lot of them, particularly Ministry of Northern Affairs, when he was in charge of everything to do with Aboriginal peoples. He's really quite something. And so we would see each other occasionally. When he came to Paris, I would be called upon to see them. And that was about it. And so when my predecessor left early, left after 4 years because of health problems. And they must have floated it around because it suddenly appeared in the paper that I was going to be asked, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were able to say, what if I was going to be asked? Will we do this? We have a very nice life, my husband and I, before I ever did this, and an enjoyable one, an intellectual life, and travel and a lot of different things. And were we going to spend 5 years really doing this? But I felt it was my duty. And I felt that I could do it. I've always, as I said in my memoirs, I never have done anything that I didn't think I could bring something to. When people ask me to do something, and I don't think I will add anything to it, I say no, because there's no point unless you can really do something with it and make it different and put your mark on it. Otherwise, somebody else might as well do it, not you.
Yes, the gentleman back there.
Okay. My name is Chris Lonsdale. I'm an assistant professor here and also a Canadian.
Professor of what?
I'm in the sports science department.
Oh.
I'm also a UK citizen as well, and I think there's quite possibly a number of people in this room who are dual citizens. My question is this. I've been away from Canada for about 7 years, but I've heard that there's a bit of a debate going on regarding the nature of dual citizenship and whether it will continue, whether one will be allowed to hold dual citizenship. I wonder if you could comment on your feelings on that, whether you think it's appropriate that people are dual citizens.
I think there are two things there. One is that dual citizenship is now allowed even by the French and the Americans, which you would never have, when I was young, I would never have believed they would ever do that. So I think that people who feel as intransigent about their citizenship as those two countries do, have dual citizenship, that it's fine. I don't worry about it for Canada at all. I don't believe that people are going to be disloyal to Canada because they're also Lebanese. A lot of discussion happened when Lebanon had those problems about a year ago, and we went and rescued 50,000 Canadians who are Lebanese origin, and then people said, oh yes, but those people have homes in Lebanon. I mean, they go home all the time, and part of them live there. Well, that's not our business. They became citizens, and once somebody is a citizen of your country, you take care of them. That's my position.
Yeah, please.
I'm Stephen, graduate of China University, now working in China University. May I ask, with all your wisdom, how would you share with us your experience in making Hong Kong a better society? Especially you mentioned the creation of a civic society in Hong Kong. How would you see the prospects of making Hong Kong a better society in that aspect?
I'm not a good person to ask about that because I don't follow it closely. And I think you'd have to be here, you'd have to be part of the society and completely commit yourself to it to figure out that. What I think is interesting to the world is how it has developed since 1997, and people have not really caught up with the idea that it is, unique and interesting and different. I don't know how it happens, though, and I could not help you in that because I'm not involved. I don't know the players. I don't know anything about them. And of course, you must never speak without research.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question. Anybody? Please.
I'm Peter Crisp. I'm from the Department of English. I was wondering if you could just comment. I also have dual citizenship. I was wondering if you could comment on how you would see the relationship of Canada and America. I don't mean in so much in practical terms, but in terms of values and outlook. To what extent do you think these are very, very different cultures? To what extent do you think they're convergent?
A Canadian is an interesting person to ask that of because they'll immediately say, so different I can hardly begin to tell you. Whereas the Americans will say, well, you're just like us, Honey, you're just like us. And I think that it begins with the kind of society we have is based upon how it was created. We started out, and always were until fairly recently, a very poor country with a terrible climate. And we have never had the kind of riches and wealth that the Americans did right from the beginning with their growing of cotton, albeit based on slaves, and tobacco and all of those kinds of things. We didn't have that until we opened up the West at the end of the 19th century and started our big wheat production and developed the kind of wheat that we could grow in our climate. We didn't have an agriculture that could be considered to be a major an economic factor for us. And before that, it was just, and unfortunately to a large degree still is, to the annoyance of many of us, a commodity-based place. Yes, we are rich in every single mineral. Yes, we have all the trees in the world, etc. But, many of us don't believe that that's what you should do because at some point when you cut the trees, you're going to end up cutting them all, right? And sometime, the forests won't grow back in time, etc. I think we have very different, we do have very different values from Americans. I think superficially we are superficially we share the Northern Hemisphere in a friendly way, although Canadians know everything about Americans and Americans don't know anything about us. And this is a great advantage to us. But our wonderful Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, said, living next to the United States is like being a mouse in bed with an elephant. If the elephant rolls over or even moves, the mouse has to fall into a crack, etc. So realistically, our economy, all our in many ways, our day-to-day life economically reverberates from what happens in the United States. And we have to be very, very well aware of that. But one of the huge differences, of course, is that we have universal health care. And we've had that for 45 years, and it's worked really well. And people take it for granted. And a lot of Canadians don't realize, because we think every Canadian travels. Not every Canadian travels, even to the United States. And they don't really realize that in the United States you're not covered automatically. I mean, it's just, we had, when my mother was dying, she was in a palliative care hospital. It was a very fine one in Canada, in Toronto. And we had, people came from all over the place to visit, and she was there for 4 months, and she lived on for another 2 or 3. And she was in a beautiful private room, and she could have whatever she wanted to eat and do anything. And people said, God, isn't this, this must be so terribly expensive for you. It cost us $12 a day because she had a private room. If she had been in a shared room, which they did have in that particular hospital, she wouldn't have paid anything. And, your children go and have their tonsils out, your grandchildren go and have tonsils out, and it doesn't cost anything. We have a system that makes it all kind of work, and I think there are inefficiencies in that system, a lot of them being, but we'd get into a healthcare discussion here. And my daughter is the expert on this, she's a general practitioner, that really there is a way in which hospitals tend to drain a lot of finances. And I think that that's something that we have to turn our attention to. People are always upset about they say they get waiting times. They want to go to the States, and they go to the Scripps Institute in La Jolla, and they'll have their MRI in 24 hours, and they'll only pay $2,400 for it. But maybe, your MRI wasn't the totally necessary MRI that had to happen within 2 days. Maybe you could wait, a month to see really if the disc in your 5th vertebrae were bulging and causing you to have sciatica. Maybe you could wait 3 months for that, if you had to. But most people don't have to wait very much. We have wonderful hospital care. But I think that's another thing. Plus the education system, I think, is an excellent one in all our provinces. And I think it varies tremendously from state to state in the United States. It's just a very, very different society. And I think, again, the history plays, because the society of the Americans initially started out with slavery as an economic benefit to the white people. And then when emancipation came, there's a whole group of people. When you talk about diversity and so on in the United States, they tend to think black and white, and we don't. Although we have a lot of black people now, but we don't have that kind of history at all. So that makes a great deal of difference. We have black people that they come from the Caribbean, and therefore they do share a great deal of our political traditions because they are former, they're Commonwealth people. They're former empire people.
Well, thank you very much, Madame Clarkson. Really a great session, and we all enjoy not only your speech, but also the question and answers. So let us give Madame Clarkson a round of
Thank you.
So again, thank you to Professor Lau and Madam Clarkson. And now if you could please remain on the stage for us to show your appreciation. And Professor Lau will now give a gift to Madam Clarkson. The gift we have given today is a set of 4 hand-painted snuff bottles of the Chinese University of Hong Kong. We hope that you've enjoyed your stay here with us today, Madam Clarkson, and it has been a very memorable experience for all of us.